I'm Ryan Bertrand. You're watching The Ugly Inside.
Welcome back to another episode of TUI Transfer Talk. The news that Claude Puel will not be our manager for the new season was greeted with a degree of positivity, and instantly ticket sales went up. That means we're once again on the managerial merry-go-round that is Southampton Football Club. So today we take a look at the profiles of the potential new candidates of the new manager, what they can offer for the Saints, how they play, if they're a good fit, and the possibility of them being the next Saints manager. Joining me on today's episode is Luke from Southampton and Dan, one of our writers from the Fanzine. Good to see you, chaps.
Yeah, good to see you, mate.
Yeah, you too, mate.
Let's start off then with Frank De Boer. Once again, a Dutch legend. He was linked with the post this time last year, but since decided to sign for Inter Milan. He was sacked in November, but let's go to Luke first. How can Frank De Boer be a good fit for the Saints?
I think if you want to look at the positive sort of matches towards what we do, he does like to bring through young players, and in a sense, he does like to develop them. But then I think when you look at De Boer, I think that he leaves too many boxes unticked for us and what we need to target. We've just had Claude Puel, who does both. You know, he can develop players and he can bring through young players. But they both play conservative styles of football. They don't really show any flexibility. They're not very proactive. There was reports of unrest in the Inter Milan dressing room of Frank De Boer as well. So you do worry about maybe seeing a few too many similarities between De Boer and Puel. So I'm not entirely sure he'd be the right fit for us.
It's interesting you say that because we want attractive football and it might be a repeat episode this season. Dan, are you excited by the prospect of Frank De Boer at Saints?
I think the name sounds good, but then when you look at sack the manager for having a negative style of football, he's lost the players in the dressing room. And so I don't really see this as an improvement. We've just sacked the manager because he's taking the club in a backwards direction instead of forwards. And I don't really see why De Boer would be the man to take us forward.
Of course, Frank De Boer had a lot of success over in Holland, winning consecutive titles with Ajax. But this would be his first job in English football. The reason why the board didn't employ him this time last season, because they were reluctant to replace one Dutch manager or one Dutch legend with another. So maybe the time is right for him now.
Well, maybe it is. I remember that he was massively linked with the Spurs job when Pochettino took over. He left us. But I was looking earlier today at what he's done. Like you've just said before, he won a couple of league titles with Ajax. But after that, he finished second with them a couple of seasons. Obviously, didn't do well at Inter. And so, for me, the way I see it, he had a great start to his managerial career. Obviously, I think he was assistant manager for the Netherlands. They got to the final of the World Cup. He won a couple of titles with Ajax, but since then he hasn't done much. So I'm not too sure whether, like I've said before, he is the man to take us forward. But it would be nice to see whether he can change the critics, because I think he has received some critics over the last season or two.
On to our second candidate then. Currently at the time of recording, he is the bookies' favourite, Mauricio Pellegrino. Not quite a household name just yet. He led Spanish side Alaves to a Copa del Rey final last season where they lost to Barcelona, and also finished 9th in La Liga last season. Luke, what do we know of Mauricio Pellegrino and how can he fit the Saints?
Well, Pellegrino is very much a protege of Rafa Benitez. He worked alongside him at Liverpool and at Valencia. So naturally, he prefers defensive football. So first of all, I think that the warning signs should be there. With Alaves, he played a defensive style of football. Now, that is understandable because the quality of players they had is not really anywhere near the top guns in the league. And okay, that's fair enough. And he did a good job at Alaves, and I'd never ever deny that. 9th and Copa del Rey final for a team tipped to go that down was a really, really good, a good achievement for him. In terms of actually being suited to Saints, not for me. I think that, yes, he's used a few young players, and yes, he's developed some. Brought a good bit of team spirit into Alaves, but we need to be looking at style of play now. We need to be looking for an attractive manager that can play high up the pitch, press opposition, and score goals. Alaves, I think they only managed to score 41 goals last season. And at that same token, I think they conceded the 4th least in La Liga with about 46. So, you know, he's clearly a good defensive coach and he can clearly get his teams well organised. But we've had a manager that can do that. And we want to go on to a bit more of an ambitious approach to football. So for me, I wouldn't actually go for Pellegrino.
Interesting you say that because, 41 goals, a lot of defensive football, as you say. They reached the cup final, a 9th place finish in the league. It's almost a carbon copy of Claude Puel's season.
It is. And as I said, it's commendable. But at the end of the day, Alaves were tipped to go down, and they have reached that level. But I think that Pellegrino probably got the most out of them that he could have done. And while I agree that Pellegrino should probably move to the Premier League or at least a better challenge now, I just don't feel as though he'd be suited to us. I really think he'd be good for Palace.
And Dan, he's been linked with the Palace vacancy, as Luke's just said. I've also been reading into some of the Echo's articles, and the Saints board they want somebody who has the experience of European football. From what I see, he's only been an assistant under Benitez, a couple of jobs back in South America as well. Do you think Pellegrino could be the man to take us to Europe?
I hope he is. I think the philosophy seems all right, but what Luke's just said, it's a bit like De Boer and Puel, how the fact that the play style is negative and we want the manager to take us forward with the playing style. I didn't see enough goals last season. I want to see a more attacking style of football. I think a lot of fans do. And if the statistics show what he is like a coach, I don't think he is the right man, because a defensive style of football is something we've seen already this season and no one's happy after it.
And these two names in particular, De Boer and Pellegrino, have been bounded about a lot of all the reports, all the papers, and these two seem to be the top two candidates. But let's look at the outside bets, and the first one is a very exciting young German manager, Julian Nagelsmann, currently at German side Hoffenheim, only 29 years old, led them to a Champions League qualification and seemingly wants to lead them on again next season. However, we would need to pay a big compensation package to secure his services. He signed a contract extension until 2021, and looking at it, this might be extremely difficult to get this manager. However, Dan, what do we know of Nagelsmann and how can he fit the Saints?
Well, Nagelsmann has hardly had a background in coaching. He had a short playing career because of injuries and then instantly went on to get his coaching badges. And I think he had played for Hoffenheim. He had a connection with the club, but they were in a relegation battle last season. They gave him a chance. He'd been coaching one of their youth teams, and he got them out of the relegation battle. And like you've just said, he got them to the Champions League qualification places. I think they're in the playoff round. So that being said, the fact that he's 29 years of age and he's got a team that, kind of like Alaves, were backed for relegation or around that area in the Bundesliga, and he's got them to the top of the table, that's really exciting. And I believe he does like an attacking style of football, so he would be the ideal from the candidates that I've seen in the papers. But like you said, the pay would be really high, and I don't think we won't be able to pay him, but convincing him to move away from a Champions League club isn't the ideal, I don't think, for him right now.
And that's a difficult, isn't it? Like, we have to pay a big compensation to get him away from Hoffenheim, which seems like an exciting project for him at the moment. And looking at it, he seems like the German Eddie Howe.
Yeah, there's definitely similarities there. As you said, I mean, there's no real chance of us paying out a 5-year contract. He's just signed there, he's happy there. And also bearing it in mind that we've only just paid out 5 or 6 million for Claude Puel to be sacked. So that's difficult. Nagelsmann, I suppose you could draw a few comparisons to Howe, in the sense that he does like his players to have a bit of freedom going forward. I like the way Nagelsmann plays. I think that the way he sets out his Hoffenheim team is very, very impressive. He plays with like a 5-2-2-1. So it's quite expansive in the wide areas, but it's narrow in the middle, but he gives them the freedom to drift. And I think that that's what perhaps a lot of our players lacked this season. I think that the attacking sort of trident that we tended to play with didn't actually have enough freedom to roam around and to create chances and to score chances by themselves. So I think that Nagelsmann, or at least a coach like him, would be a good suit for us. I think that obviously experience would be an issue because he's only ever managed for one season at Hoffenheim, but he's got a good background to him. He worked under Thomas Tuchel at Augsburg for a little while. Obviously it won't be him, just purely based on financial difficulties. But I think that if we're aiming for the likes of Nagelsmann, I think that we're on the right track.
And on to our final candidate then, probably won't go down too well with pockets of Saints fans. However, Ryan Giggs, according to the tabloids is prepared to take his first big step in management. However, the Saints board are very unlikely to employ a manager with little experience. What can Giggs bring to the Saints, and how much of the reports are you believing, Luke?
In terms of the reports that Giggs wants to manage Saints, yeah, I believe that. I think a lot of managers want to manage Saints, but it won't happen. It cannot happen. I think that the board have got too much sense about them to do that. He was probably a bit of an average assistant manager, didn't really get on with Van Gaal at United, and when he managed for the last 4 games, he hardly sort of set the world on fire. I don't know. I don't think the Premier League is the best starting point for Giggs. He needs to work his way up. Perhaps at a League One side. To manage Saints, definitely not. I think that it's ludicrous that his name's even sort of in the running. I think that we're better than that, and I think that we need to be a lot more ambitious if we're going to get anywhere.
And Dan, Giggs won't be a fan's favourite from the start. It's always difficult to win over the fans, and that's partially down to why Claude lost his position, because he lost to fans. If Giggs starts without the fans, it's going to be another toxic situation.
Oh, it's a huge risk. It would be an absolutely huge risk to appoint him. The fact that he's got the name Ryan Giggs, you just associate him with being such a good player. But then you look at the managerial background, there's none, except for being the assistant at Man United, and they didn't even have too good a spell under Van Gaal for the club that they are. I'm not sure whether he should go to the really bottom leagues of England. League One, honestly, I think a team like Sunderland would be a good point. They're kind of in a bad place at the moment. He could take them back up if he is a decent coach. But Southampton, no. If they're looking for Europe, he's not. He can only bring experience, and that's as a player, not as a manager.
Excellent stuff then, chaps. And Saints have actually set themselves a deadline to employ a new manager before the players return for pre-season training on June the 29th. We're recording this on June the 18th, so that's about 11 days to go. So keep your ears to the ground, Saints fans. And of those 4 candidates, first of all, Dan, which one would you prefer?
Nagelsmann, but that's not going to happen, so let's say De Boer.
And Luke, same question, mate?
Yeah, I think I'd probably echo Dan's thoughts there. I mean, Nagelsmann's probably unrealistic right now. And I think that you'd be going for the lesser of 2 evils in the sense of De Boer and Pellegrino. So probably based on experience, and that goes to European experience as well, you probably have to say Frank De Boer.
Excellent stuff then, chaps. Thanks for watching the latest episode of TUI Transfer Talk. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Have I missed any other candidates? Which manager would you prefer at the Saints? Leave us your likes, your comments, and subscribe for more.